Caldwell. I'm a patron of the Belfast Book Festival and a judge of the Martine Crawford Award for Short Story this year. Martine Crawford was a writer whose work span many genres, including poetry, journalism and screenwriting. He was a creative writing tutor at the Crescent in Belfast for several years and was the director of the Between the Lines Festival, now the Belfast Book Festival. He died suddenly in 2004, and these awards in his memory are a beautiful tribute to a writer and a man who, in the words of poet Moira Donaldson and fellow judge of the Martine Crawford Poetry Awards, wrote as he lived with a combination of intelligence and daring, revolutionary spirit and generosity of heart. These awards for emerging writers have two categories, for poetry and for short stories. So I judged the latter, along with Belfast writers Paul McVeigh and Rachel Kelly. Our second runner-up was Self-Defense by Vijay Khurana, featuring a kangaroo with homicidal tendencies. Our runner-up was Let Everything Happen to You by Laura Tice, who's a poet and was second runner-up in the poetry as well as in this short story competition. And she wrote a brilliant, disturbing, very contemporary story about young female sexuality in the age of Instagram culture and predatory older males. But our winner was Landslides by Lucy Beevor. Lucy, it's lovely to speak to you today and to congratulate you in person. And there's a lovely coincidence because we know each other very little, because you work for Fighting Words NI, which is the Northern Irish chapter of the organisation set up in Dublin by Roddy Doyle, inspired by Dave Egger's brilliant 826 Valencia, which is an organisation that delivers creative writing workshops for children. And I'm a patron of Fighting Words, and so I've seen some of the behind the scenes work. I've seen the workshops in action. I've seen your fundraising. I didn't know that you wrote. I had never read any of your work, and one of the brilliant things is these awards are judged from the beginning completely anonymously. So they're all sifted anonymously, they're read anonymously, and one of the most fun things as a judge is delivering the list of our winners and runners-up and shortlist to Noor Ape Mohammed and Gail Jones at the Crescent and saying, reveal who are our winners this year. And so you were the winner. Congratulations. And how did it feel to get the phone call from Crescent CEO Sophie Hales telling you that you'd won?
Oh, Lucy, thank you so much. And it is a lovely coincidence to be here with you today. It was fantastic. It was amazing. It was a pinch yourself moment, I suppose. And I started writing at the Crescent. When I moved to Belfast in 2014, I took classes there, and I'd forgotten that Martine Crawford was also a tutor there. So I took classes with playwright Joe Egan, poet Ruth Carr. So I feel it's amazing that 6-7 years later, I'm here winning this extraordinary award. No, I really, it's a really lovely feeling. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah.
You were shortlisted in 2019 for the Martine Crawford Award, and you've been shortlisted for several other Irish prizes. I think this is your first big win.
It is.
Can you tell me, how important do prizes feel these days in the murder? Entering them, long listings, short listings?
I suppose it's a very personal thing, isn't it? Well, I feel I can only speak for myself, Lucy, but they are important in that to a certain extent I can measure my progress against some kind of objective measure. Although I think, as you said, in the awards ceremony itself, there is some chance as well, isn't it, that the judge is receptive to your particular story on that day. But I think for me, when I am not shortlisted or I don't hear back from the prize, what I tend to do is go back to the story and look at it again and think, well, why didn't that land? And can I work on it a bit more? Is there something else that it's asking of me as its creator? So in a way, it becomes a sort of discipline, I suppose, to think, okay, it's an opportunity to go back and try again. So I find that, if you can make a positive out of rejection, then I certainly try to do that. And I write because I love to write. I don't write because I want to submit to awards, but they are a good measure of my progress, yes.
That's such a wise and level-headed way. Thank you. Let's talk about your winning story. It's called Landslides. And all of the judges thought it was very accomplished, a very classical short story. It's about a mother bidding farewell to her adult son. He's leaving Brazil for a new life in London, and she suspects he won't return. And there's the feeling running through the story of her knowledge that even if he does return, he will be changed irrevocably. And when we were summing up and discussing our comments, one of us judges praised the story's timeless nature, and we felt that in a strange way it could have been a traditional Irish story of several decades ago. And it's interesting, it was close run, as you know, between your story and our second runner-up, which was very different, which was very flashily contemporary and very urgently contemporary. But your story edged it because every single detail of this world felt so deeply imagined. Every sentence felt considered and polished. The rhythms of it felt flawless. All the emotions underplayed. So it's a really beautiful story, and I look forward to more people reading it. And when they see the video, when they hear you've won the award, can you tell us a bit about where the story began for you and what your connection is to Brazil? It felt a story written by someone who knows Brazil very intimately.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Lucy, for those comments. I shall hold them close as I keep writing. Yes. So my husband is from Brazil, from São Paulo. So I know the country pretty well. I've been going back and forth over 20 years. But it's interesting what you said about the resonance with, say, Ireland 30, 40 years ago, because while I was writing it, I was thinking very much about Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín, and the film I loved, the book I loved. But when I remember sitting in the Queen's Film Theatre and watching the film and thinking, this young woman is leaving Ireland, and in her mind, she will most likely never come back. And in her family's mind, she will most likely never come back. And it's expensive, and it takes 3 weeks to sail to New York, and they can communicate by letters, but they take 3 months. And that's such a contrast to what we can do now with global travel being cheaper and WhatsApp and Skype, etc. But I think I was reaching for a sort of a 2021 equivalent of that situation. And immigration, as we know, is a massive feature of our global society. And I suppose with my proximity to Brazil and my awareness that, for a country with huge levels of poverty and an economic need to leave the country, but the people at home aren't going to be able to afford a flight to London once a year, or for the main character to come back. And I felt that there would be a real sense of longing and loss in that scenario, in that setup. And of course, what's so beautiful about a short story is to encapsulate enormous feelings in just 2,500 words. Such a challenge, but I think such a privilege in a way to be able to achieve that. Yeah.
Yes, and it was funny. I said your story was timeless, but also there was a particular resonance to reading it in this year of all years, because I'm in London.
Yeah.
I'm in London, where, as you can tell, it's like 30 degrees. I'm sweltering in my box flat. But I'm in London, and my parents are in Belfast, and I travel back and forth a lot. And you assume that you can, until suddenly this past year, we haven't been able to.
Yeah.
I've been home with my children once this year to see my parents, and we managed the trip back once last year. And my daughter's only 3, so such a huge chunk of her life, you think you're not too far away. I have another sister in Australia, who we haven't seen for a couple of years, and I'm not likely to see for some time more. And so there was that feeling as well that I loved in your story, that distances, even when we can communicate on WhatsApp, even when we can get on a flight and travel to another place, we kid ourselves that distances are less than they are. Sometimes technology shortens distances in wonderful ways, but in other times, the physical distances are real.
Yes, and that we crave that physical contact as well, don't we? Even if it's just sitting side by side with a pot of tea between you, talking about the most banal events of one's life. But that, I think, is Yes, it's a really important feature, Lucy. And so many families are affected by it. I mean, think of Indian families in the UK who, can't go back. Brazil, we can't go back. The COVID situation there is horrendous at the moment. So, there is a real sense of loss, I think, for so many families at the moment. You're right. Yeah.
I love the physical details of your story. The mother is patting a steak with a piece of kitchen roll before she cooks it. And the feeling of the water bottles at the kiosk and her desperation to cook a meal for her son before he goes. I loved all of those details. It felt that in the face of all this distance, she's trying to feed him. She's trying to, that very intimate, very, very maternal act is lovely. Yes. Can you talk us through some of I know you have you have Brazilian family. Some of the challenges when you were drafting and when you were rewriting this story, were the challenges in layering the world. Toni Morrison always talks really interestingly about how, for her, a first draft is often a sketch, and subsequent drafts of things are about adding layer and turning up the volume or adding colour. So Graham Greene is the opposite. He says that writers are either putter-inners or taker-outers, and he's a taker-outer. Everything goes in the first draft, kind of slapdash, and then he winnows. What sort of writer were you with this story?
Oh, I'd definitely be Toni Morrison's school of thought, Lucy. Yes, I mean, I don't like to say this in a way, but I am a slow writer. I hope that I really feel that might begin to change, and that's just, I think, about the length of time that I've been writing. But yes, the layers, going back to it, constantly revisiting it and building it up, probably certainly taking out a huge amount of that first draft. Yes, a bit of Graham Greene there as well, because but again, learning the process, isn't it? And learning what works for you as a writer. It's interesting to hear how other writers do it, but I think there's also something that I've learned is building up the confidence that, okay, my approach is all right. I end up with something. It doesn't really matter how I got there. But yes, I would say I would layer upon layer upon layer, and getting some feedback as well, isn't it, from friends, and how does this land with you, and hearing what they have to say, certainly to get a bit more objective perspective into it.
What does make a good story for you? And who are your favourite? Do you have favourite short stories or favourite short story writers, Brazilian or Irish or anyone?
I would say I've dived deep into Irish short story writers while I've lived here, Lucy. I love your the ones I've heard from you on the Radio 4. Beautiful stories. Paul McVeigh, another fabulous writer from here. Claire Keegan, a remarkable writer. And then I would go back to as well, William Trevor. I mean, you talked about understated. The stories of his that I've read as well, that sort of, yes, there's so much flowing beneath the surface. I find that artistry something.
Claire Keegan as well. I've been lucky enough to read a proof of her new novella that's coming with Faber this autumn.
Oh, lucky.
It's very much about the mother and baby homes, and it's immaculate, and all the emotion underneath. She very much like William Trevor. Yeah, and I sense it's lovely, because I think I can sense that in Landslides, and I can't wait to read more of your work. So what is next? I mean, I know that in your day job, I've observed some of the workshops at Fighting Words, and I mean, they can go in any direction. You put a group of really excited 8-year-olds in a room, 10-year-olds in a room, and you do whatever it takes to unlock their imaginations, and they're off. What's next for you and your work?
Well, I mean, I write every day, so for an hour a day. So I always have something going. So I'm working on my next short story. I've got another one that's possibly almost completed. So I don't know, Lucy. There isn't a game plan. Maybe one day I'd love to put them together, but I just don't know yet. I think particularly this award has sort of brought me up to a level where suddenly I can look around and think about options that I almost hadn't dared consider before. So I'm still in the observing mode and imagining mode.
One of the wonderful things about this award is the two runners-up both receive a cash prize of £250, and as a winner you receive a cash prize of £1,000 and a 5-night stay at the beautiful River Mill. I haven't been lucky enough to visit the River Mill myself, but I've seen the pictures. I follow everything Paul Madden posts. It looks completely idyllic, and I think it's such a wonderful thing. I have found that at different stages of my writing life, but especially starting out, the most valuable gift a writer can have is time and space. And, the money to buy you freedom from, paying the rent and the day-to-day, grind of bills, and just that breathing space. And then going away, being able to leave the world behind and just focus on writing is such a gift. So we're very grateful to the sponsors, National Collection of Northern Ireland Publications, NIPR, for their contribution to cash prizes, and the River Mill. Have you planned yet when you think you might be able to go away, or?
No, there will be a bit of negotiation in terms of children and schedules, etc. But no, it's an incredibly generous prize. It really is, Lucy. It's mind-blowingly so. I think it's amazing that individuals recognise, as you say, what's needed, what the elements are, the ingredients that need to go into the pot to help emerging writers. I think it's phenomenal. Really, really.
Thank you. Well, congratulations once again. You were such a worthy winner, and I can't wait for the next stories.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much. Thank you.